Sarah Mitchell pressed her palm against the surgical wing wall, steadying herself as the floor tilted beneath her feet. 11 o'clock at night, and she shouldn't be here, not standing, not waiting, not conscious of the thing moving beneath the bandage behind her left ear. Through the double doors, her father lay opened on an operating table. 73 years old, Korean War veteran, a man who hadn't seen a doctor in 5 decades. Robert Mitchell was finally letting someone cut into the secret he'd carried in his back since 1952. But Sarah had her own secret, something alive, something that pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't hers. Her sister Emily paced nearby, nurse's clogs squeaking against linoleum. Neither of them knew yet that what doctors would pull from their bodies, fathers and daughters, would unravel a 50-year silence that had been eating them both alive. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. 3 weeks earlier, the Mitchell family home had looked the way it always did on Sunday evenings. American flag hanging from the porch of the 2-story craftsman, built the same year Robert Mitchell returned from Korea in 1952. The scent of cornbread drifted through open windows while big band music played on the radio inside, the same stations Bob had listened to for 70 years. Sarah Mitchell, 28, and the youngest of 3 children, had arrived early that September afternoon. She managed Powell's Books in downtown Portland, a job that suited her quiet, bookish nature. Auburn-haired and pale-skinned, with a scatter of freckles across her nose, she'd unconsciously touched the small Band-Aid behind her left ear 3 times during dinner. Just a mosquito bite from Costa Rica, she'd told herself. 4 weeks since that trip, her first time leaving the country, and the damn thing still hadn't healed. Her sister Emily had noticed. Emily noticed everything. At 33, the middle child worked as a registered nurse in Providence, Portland's ICU, and her medical training made her observant in ways that unnerved her siblings. Divorced 2 years now, she lived 15 minutes from their father and had appointed herself the family's unofficial caretaker since their mother Margaret's death in 2019. Robert Bob Mitchell sat at the head of the table in his standard blue chambray work shirt, the same style he'd worn for 5 decades. At 73, he was still tall but stooped now, his hands calloused from endless hours in the woodshop behind the house. He walked with a slight limp he attributed to age, winced when reaching overhead, and dismissed his chronic back pain as just another indignity of getting old. What his children didn't know, Bob Mitchell hadn't seen a doctor since his discharge from the VA in 1953. 70 years of refusing medical care, of suffering in silence, of keeping secrets locked as tight as the metal box hidden in his workshop. Their oldest brother David rarely made it down from Seattle anymore. At 36, estranged since his own divorce, he'd called that Sunday to cancel. Another fracture in a family already breaking apart. Sunday dinners had been Margaret's tradition. 46 years of marriage, every week without fail. After her death from cancer that had been found too late, Bob had tried to maintain the ritual. But everything felt strained now, forced. The empty chair where Margaret used to sit seemed to grow larger each week. Sarah set the table around that absence while Emily checked the pot roast in the oven. Bob carved the meat with shaking hands none of them mentioned. The radio played You Send Me by Sam Cooke, and for a moment Bob's eyes went distant. Margaret's favorite song. On the wall behind him hung a photograph from 1952, a young soldier in uniform, handsome and whole, someone they barely recognized as their father. The flag outside fluttered in the October wind, hanging as it did every single day, marking time in a house where everything had stopped the day Margaret died. The water pitcher was heavier than Sarah expected. As she reached across the table, her hair tie caught on the Band-Aid behind her ear, pulling it loose. The adhesive peeled back with a sharp sting. "What's that behind your ear, honey?" Bob asked, his fork pausing midway to his mouth. Sarah's hand flew up instinctively. "Just a mosquito bite from Costa Rica. Won't heal." Emily's head snapped up from her plate, her nurse's radar activated instantly. "Let me see." It's nothing." "Sarah." Emily was already standing, moving around the table with professional efficiency. "Let me see." Sarah sighed and pulled her auburn hair aside. Emily's fingers were gentle but clinical as they probed the area behind Sarah's ear. The touch made Sarah flinch. The bump had grown. What had been pea-sized that morning was now the size of a marble. The skin stretched tight and shiny over it, warm to the touch. At the center sat a dark pinpoint, like a pore that had opened too wide. Emily's face went carefully neutral, the expression she wore when something worried her. "Sarah, how long has this been like this?" "A week, maybe 2. It's just irritated." "This isn't a mosquito bite." Emily leaned closer, examining it under the dining room light. I don't know what this is, but it needs to be looked at." Bob set down his fork with unusual force. "You should go to the doctor." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Sarah and Emily exchanged a glance. "Dad," Emily said carefully, "you haven't been to a doctor in 50 years." Bob's face hardened into the expression they all knew meant the conversation was over. He changed the subject with the practiced ease of someone who'd been dodging difficult topics for decades. "More cornbread, anyone?" But the subject wasn't finished with him. Bob reached overhead for the serving platter on the top shelf of the hutch. The movement triggered something catastrophic in his upper back, a white-hot spike of pain that drove the breath from his lungs. The platter clattered against the shelf. He gasped and dropped his arm, gripping the edge of the table. His face went chalk white. "Dad!" Sarah and Emily moved simultaneously, chairs scraping against hardwood. "I'm fine." Bob's voice came out tight and thin. "Just my back. Old injury." Emily was already in nurse mode, one hand steadying him, the other reaching for his wrist to check his pulse. "Sit down. Where does it hurt?" Bob lowered himself carefully into his chair, every movement calculated to avoid the pain. "Between my shoulder blades. Been hurting more lately." "Since when?" Emily's voice carried the particular sharpness of someone who already knew the answer would be worse than expected. "Few months, maybe longer." The truth, years getting progressively worse, stayed locked behind his teeth. "Let me examine it." "No." The word came out harder than Bob intended. "It's nothing. I don't need—" He tried to stand too quickly. The pain flashed again, stealing his balance. He staggered sideways. Sarah caught him, her hands gripping his arm. "Dad!" Emily's voice cut through the room with the authority of someone who'd seen too many patients wait too long. "That's it. You're seeing a doctor tomorrow." "I said I'm fine." Bob's anger was rare enough to shock them both into silence, but Emily had watched their mother die of cancer found too late. She'd held Margaret's hand through chemo that came months after it could have helped. She wasn't losing another parent to stubborn pride. Mom died because she waited too long. Emily's voice broke on the words. "I'm not losing you too." The silence that followed was heavy with everything unsaid. Bob saw his daughter's faces, the fear there, the grief still raw from losing Margaret just 5 years ago. His walls cracked just slightly. "I'll think about it," he muttered. Not good enough. I'm making you an appointment." Dinner continued in uncomfortable silence. The radio played Some Enchanted Evening, Margaret's favorite. Bob stared at the empty chair where she used to sit, and something in his expression softened. "She'd want you both to be careful," he said quietly. "She always said, 'Don't wait.'" He wasn't talking about just Sarah's bump. After dinner, Bob retreated to his woodshop, his pattern whenever emotions ran too high. Sarah helped Emily with the dishes, both of them moving in the familiar rhythm they'd learned from their mother. "He's hiding something," Emily said, scrubbing a plate harder than necessary. "He's always hidden things. The war. This is different. I've seen enough patients. That pain, it's not just arthritis." "What do you think it is?" "I don't know, but I'm going to find out." In the bathroom, Sarah examined her reflection in the mirror. She touched the bump gently, and her breath caught. For just a second, she could swear she'd felt something shift beneath the surface, something that moved. "No," she whispered to her reflection. "No, no, no." Tomorrow, she'd call her doctor. Tomorrow, everything would change. Monday morning at Powell's Books started like any other. Sarah shelved returns in the poetry section, helped a regular find the new Louise Erdrich, rang up sales with practiced efficiency. But every few minutes, her hand drifted unconsciously to her neck. The bump had grown overnight. The throbbing had become constant, a second heartbeat pulsing behind her ear. When she leaned left to reach a high shelf, her shirt collar brushed against it, and she gasped at the sharp pain. "Are you all right?" An elderly customer peered at her with concern. "You keep touching your neck." "I'm fine," Sarah lied, forcing a smile. "Just a stiff muscle." During her lunch break, she sat in the back office and called her doctor's office. The earliest appointment was Thursday. When she explained about the swelling and pain, the receptionist's voice shifted. "We can fit you in tomorrow afternoon, 2:00. Sarah texted Emily. "Made doctor appointment for tomorrow." Emily's response came immediately. "Good. Dad's appointment is tomorrow morning. I'm going with him. Want me to come to yours too?" "I'll be fine. Focus on Dad." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The throbbing behind her ear kept her awake, each pulse seeming louder in the darkness of her studio apartment. At 2:30 in the morning, she gave up and went to the bathroom. Under the harsh fluorescent light, she peeled back the fresh Band-Aid she'd applied before bed. The dark pinpoint at the center had opened into a thin slit. Clear fluid beaded at the opening, catching the light. Sarah leaned closer to the mirror, her breath fogging the glass. She held perfectly still, watching. And then it happened. Something pale rose from the slit, thin as a thread, white against the inflamed skin. It emerged slowly, tasting the air, then withdrew back inside. Sarah's scream echoed off the tile walls. She stumbled backward, hitting the shower curtain, her hands shaking so violently she could barely grip her phone. Emily answered on the second ring. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "There's something—" Sarah's voice broke. "There's something moving, inside it. There's something alive. I'm coming right now. Don't touch it. I'm coming." 15 minutes later, Emily was examining the bump with a flashlight, her professional mask firmly in place. But Sarah could see the fear in her sister's eyes. "We're not waiting until tomorrow," Emily said quietly. "We're going to the ER. Now. It's 3 in the morning. The appointment is in 12 hours. There is something alive in there, Sarah. We're going." While Sarah dealt with her crisis, their father was having his own revelation. Bob Mitchell sat alone in his kitchen Monday morning, the house too quiet without Margaret's presence. His coffee had gone cold while he stared at nothing, his left arm hanging useless at his side. He couldn't raise it above his shoulder anymore. The pain had gotten that bad. He looked at Margaret's photograph on the mantel, her in her nurse's uniform from the war, young and smiling. "I promised you I'd take care of them," he whispered. "But who takes care of me now you're gone?" The woodshop called to him. It always did when things got hard. He made his way slowly to the garage, moving like a much older man than 73. The chair he'd been building for Sarah sat half-finished on the workbench. He reached for his chisel, and blinding pain shot through his upper back. His knees buckled. He caught himself on the workbench, breathing hard, his vision swimming. His hand went automatically to the spot between his shoulder blades, the raised area he'd felt for decades. But something was different now. The skin was hot, swollen, more prominent than before. Bob made his decision then. He'd go to Emily's appointment. He'd let them look at it. But first he needed something. From the bottom drawer, hidden beneath old blueprints, he pulled out a metal box. He hadn't opened it in years. Inside lay his Purple Heart, his Bronze Star, dog tags, and a photograph. 4 young soldiers in Korea, winter 1952. Only Bob had survived. And there, at the bottom, a yellowed envelope, unopened, postmarked 1953. Official inquiry from the U.S. Army. He couldn't look at it. Not yet. At 3:45 in the morning, Sarah sat in Providence Portland's emergency room while Emily handled the intake paperwork. Dr. James Cooper, an ER resident in his 30s, examined the lesion with a magnifying glass. "Looks like a furuncle, a deep abscess," he said. "We'll numb it, drain it, simple procedure." "But I saw something move," Sarah insisted. Dr. Cooper's smile was kind but dismissive. "Infection can create a pulsing sensation." Emily, standing beside her sister, spoke with the directness of one medical professional to another. "Jim, look closer. Really look, Doctor." Cooper leaned in with his light. Something beneath the surface shifted, visible even to him. His expression changed. "Let me get a second opinion." Dr. Rachel Hoffman arrived 20 minutes later, an ENT surgeon in her 40s with steady hands and sharp eyes. She asked about Sarah's travel history, about mosquito bites in the rainforest, and Sarah watched the doctor's hypothesis form in real time. "We're going to make a small incision and extract whatever's in there," Dr. Hoffman explained. The procedure began with local anesthetic. Dr. Cooper made a careful cut. Yellowish fluid drained. "See? Just—" He stopped mid-sentence. Something pale writhed in the opening. Dr. Hoffman used forceps, pulled gently, and out slid a segmented white larva, an 1.5 inches long, still moving. It dropped into a sterile dish where it curled and uncurled, seeking. Sarah stared in horror. Emily gasped. Dr. Cooper stepped back. "Botfly larva," Dr. Hoffman said calmly. "Dermatobia hominis." She irrigated the wound. More movement inside. A second, smaller larva emerged. "We need imaging," Dr. Hoffman said. "There may be more." The CT scan results came back at 4:30 in the morning. Dr. Hoffman showed Sarah and Emily the screen, 5 to 7 distinct pockets visible in the tissue behind Sarah's ear. "Surgery," Dr. Hoffman said. "This morning, we need to remove all of them." Sarah's world tilted. At 8 o'clock that same morning, Emily drove Bob to the VA clinic for his first appointment in 70 years. When the doctor discovered the hot, inflamed mass on Bob's upper back and ordered immediate imaging, Emily's phone rang. It was the hospital. Sarah was being prepped for surgery right now. Emily looked at her father, then at her phone, torn between two crises. "Go to your sister," Bob said quietly. "No, she's in surgery. You're here now. Let's get you checked." The X-ray showed a metallic foreign object, 4.2 centimeters long, embedded in muscle near his spine, surrounded by infection. "Mr. Mitchell," the doctor said slowly, "you have a bullet fragment in your back." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Bob's voice was quiet, resigned. "From Korea. They said it was safer to leave it in. 1953. By Tuesday afternoon, both father and daughter had surgeries scheduled. Something buried inside each of them was finally coming out. Sarah counted backward from 10 as the anesthesiologist instructed. The operating room lights were too bright, burning white against her closing eyelids. 10, 9, 8. Darkness took her before she reached 7. Dr. Rachel Hoffman's surgical team moved with practiced precision. At 7:45 Tuesday morning, the incision extended from the ER's preliminary cut. The first pocket of tissue opened, and a pale, segmented body writhed in the light, 3 centimeters long, extracted with careful forceps. It dropped into the specimen tray with a wet sound. 1, Dr. Hoffman said. Deeper dissection revealed the second, thicker than the first at 3.5 centimeters. Saline irrigation flushed the cavity, and more movement became visible. Larvae 3 and 4 came from adjacent pockets, both 2 centimeters, their bodies curling reflexively when exposed to air. The 5th was lodged against the mastoid bone. Tiny hooks embedded in tissue made extraction difficult. When Dr. Hoffman finally freed it, tissue tore and bleeding started. The surgical nurse applied pressure while the doctor controlled the vessels. 4 centimeters long, thick-bodied, it was the largest yet. Number 6 required tunneling through a separate channel. 3 centimeters. The tray was filling. Dr. Hoffman consulted the CT images again, then probed deeper with guidance from the scan. Near the temporal bone, she found the 7th, 4.5 centimeters, writhing violently when the forceps touched it, the largest of all. But the CT had suggested 8 pockets. Dr. Hoffman explored the deepest shadow extensively, her instruments searching every crevice of inflamed tissue. No movement, no resistance, just empty space and angry red tissue. "Could be an artifact on the scan," the surgical PA suggested. "Could be an empty pocket," Dr. Hoffman murmured. "Or dormant." She probed again, conscious of the facial nerve running nearby. Going deeper risked permanent damage. After several minutes, she made her decision. "We've cleared everything accessible. Close." At 9:20, the surgery was complete. 7 larvae sat in the specimen jar, still twitching slightly. The wound was closed in careful layers, a large bandage wrapped around Sarah's head. Sarah woke in recovery at 10:45. The world swam into focus slowly. Ceiling tiles, the beep of monitors, Emily's face hovering above her. "Is it?" Sarah's voice came out hoarse from the breathing tube. "All gone?" Emily's hesitation told her everything before the words came. "They removed 7. 7? Sarah tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her skull. The CT suggested 6 to 7 pockets. They found larvae in 7 locations. Emily held her hand. But there was one shadow on the imaging, deeper. They explored it thoroughly and found nothing. So there might still be one inside me. There's no evidence of an 8th larva, but the doctor said she can't be 100% certain. Sarah closed her eyes against tears. After everything, the terror, the surgery, the extraction of 7 organisms from her body, she still didn't know if it was over. Across town, Bob Mitchell sat in an exam room while Dr. Patterson reviewed his x-rays. Emily stood beside her father, her arms crossed, her jaw set. "Mr. Mitchell, you have a significant metallic foreign body embedded in your upper back." Dr. Patterson pointed to the image on the screen. 4.2 centimeters long, irregular shape, surrounded by inflamed tissue and what appears to be an abscess. Emily leaned forward, studying the X-ray with professional interest. "Is that shrapnel?" Bob's voice was quiet, almost resigned. "Bullet fragment. Korea." The room went silent. Emily turned to stare at her father. "You've had a bullet in your back for 70 years? Field surgeon in 1953 said extraction was too risky, deemed it safer to leave it." "Why didn't you?" Emily's voice cracked. We never knew?" "Didn't seem relevant." Dr. Patterson cleared his throat. "Mr. Mitchell, we need more detailed imaging, a CT scan to determine the fragment's exact position and assess the surrounding tissue." The CT revealed what the X-ray had only hinted at. The bullet fragment had shifted over the decades, now pressing against an intercostal nerve. The surrounding tissue showed significant inflammation and the beginning of an abscess. Most concerning, its proximity to the thoracic cavity. In the hallway outside radiology, Emily confronted her father. "You've been in pain for how long?" "It was manageable." "Mom died of cancer. We found too late." Tears streamed down Emily's face. "You've had a bullet festering for 70 years. What is wrong with this family?" Bob's walls cracked slightly. "Your mother knew. She was the only one. She helped me manage it. After she died, I just kept going." Emily stopped, her anger shifting to something softer. "She knew? She was my caretaker, my secret keeper." Bob's voice broke on the words. "Dad, this needs to come out." "I know." At 2:00, Dr. Sarah Chen reviewed the imaging in her office. The thoracic surgeon was in her 50s, Vietnamese-American with steady hands and 3 decades of experience. The irony of a Vietnamese surgeon operating on a Korean War veteran's bullet wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "The fragment has encapsulated over the years, but recent movement has caused inflammation," Dr. Chen explained, pointing to the CT images. "The infection is why your pain has worsened. If we don't remove it, you risk sepsis, potentially pneumonia." "How soon?" Bob asked. "Tomorrow morning. We'll start IV antibiotics tonight to stabilize the infection." Emily called David while Bob was being admitted. Their brother answered on the first ring. "How is he?" "He has a bullet fragment in his back from Korea. For 70 years, did you know?" "What? No, Jesus, Em. Can you come down?" "I'm already on the road." David arrived at 4 that afternoon, walking into his father's hospital room looking like he hadn't slept. He'd driven straight from Seattle, and the shock on his face when he saw Bob in a hospital gown was visible. His father had aged so much since David had last visited 18 months ago. "Dad? Son?" The greeting was stiff, formal. Years of distance couldn't be bridged in a moment. But David was here, and that was something. Tuesday evening found Sarah in a regular hospital room, her head wrapped in bandages, jumping at every sensation. When Dr. Hoffman made evening rounds, Sarah asked the question she'd been dreading. "What about the 8th shadow?" Dr. Hoffman sat on the edge of the bed, her face kind but honest. "It could have been an imaging artifact. Could have been an empty pocket. We won't know unless symptoms recur." "So I might still have one inside me. There's no evidence of an eighth larva, but I can't say with absolute certainty. Dr. Hoffman squeezed Sarah's hand. We'll do a follow-up CT in 2 weeks. After the doctor left, Emily came to Sarah's room. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes from shuttling between her sister and father on different floors. "How's Dad?" Sarah asked. Emily sank into the visitor's chair. "He has a bullet fragment in his back. From Korea. For 70 years. Sarah's mind struggled to process this. "What?" "None of us knew. He never told us." Emily's voice held a mixture of anger and grief. "Did Mom ever say anything to you?" "No. Nothing. He never talked about the war. Ever." They sat in silence, both processing the parallel revelations. Both had something buried inside that was being forced out. Both had kept their suffering quiet until it became unbearable. "We're the same," Sarah whispered. "Him and me. We both hide things." "Yeah," Emily said softly. "I know." That night, medicated but restless, Sarah fell into an uneasy sleep. She dreamed of operating rooms, but it was her father on the table. Surgeons pulled not larvae but bullets. Not bullets but secrets, unraveling like thread, spilling across the sterile floor. She woke screaming, a nurse rushing in to check on her. After that, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, feeling the pulse behind her ear. Her own heartbeat or something else, she couldn't tell anymore. One floor down, Bob Mitchell couldn't sleep either. Preoperative anxiety mixed with pain despite the medication. The IV antibiotics dripped steadily into his arm, fighting the infection that had bloomed around metal that had lived in his body since Eisenhower was president. On his bedside table sat a small overnight bag Emily had brought from his house. Inside, without asking his permission, she'd packed the metal box from his wood shop. A note in her handwriting lay on top. "I think you need this. I think we need this. I think we need M." At 3 a.m, Bob finally opened it. The Purple Heart lay on top, the medal he'd never displayed. Beneath it, the bronze star he'd tucked away in 1953. Dog tags that read, "Mitchell, Robert J., Opus, Methodist." A photograph. 4 young soldiers in winter gear, Korea, 1952. Bob recognized himself, Lieutenant Chen, Private Morrison, Corporal Davies. Only Bob had survived. The yellowed envelope with the official seal, postmarked April 15, 1953. He'd never opened it. 70 years of carrying it, unopened. And at the bottom, wrapped in faded red silk, something small and heavy. Bob's hands shook as he opened the letter for the first time. His eyes scanned the typed words: official inquiry, court-martial proceedings, dismissed due to Lieutenant Chen's death, insufficient evidence to proceed. The words blurred as tears fell. He gripped the Purple Heart in his fist. "Oh, God! Oh, God!" A nurse checked on him. "Mr. Mitchell, are you all right?" Bob's voice was barely audible. "I need to talk to my daughters, tomorrow, before surgery." He unwrapped the silk bundle with trembling fingers. Inside, a fragment of parachute silk with Chinese characters embroidered on it, blood-stained, decades old, and a small metal object, a bullet, the match to what was embedded in his back. But this one had been removed from someone else. "I'm sorry," Bob whispered to the photograph of 4 young soldiers. "I'm so sorry." Fragments of memory assaulted him. Snow, gunfire, a face, a choice. "Leave him." "I can't." Explosion. Darkness. As dawn approached, Bob pulled out his phone and texted Emily. "Need to talk to you and Sarah before surgery. Both of you. 7 a.m. Emily, awake and worrying in the family waiting room, responded immediately. "Okay, Dad. We'll be there." Bob stared at the ceiling, knowing that in a few hours everything would change. One floor up, Sarah was doing the same, both of them carrying secrets that weighed more than bullets or larvae. Both of them finally ready to let them out. At 7 o'clock Wednesday morning, Bob Mitchell's hospital room held all three of his children for the first time in over a year. Emily stood closest to the bed. Sarah sat in a wheelchair with bandages wrapped around her head, and David leaned against the wall by the window, his arms crossed defensively. The metal box lay open on Bob's bedside tray, its contents arranged like evidence at a trial. Purple heart, bronze star, dog tags, the photograph of 4 young soldiers who would never grow old together. The unopened letter, opened now, finally, and the silk bundle, unwrapped. Bob sat propped up in his hospital gown, looking older and more vulnerable than his children had ever seen him. His surgery was scheduled for 9 o'clock. In 2 hours they would cut into his back and remove the fragment he'd carried since before any of them were born. "I need to tell you something before they put me under," Bob said, his voice rough. "In case I don't make it." "Dad, you're going to be fine," Emily started. "Let me talk." Bob's hand trembled as he gestured to the contents of the box. "I've been silent for 70 years. Let me talk." The children went quiet. Korea, November 1952. Bob's eyes went distant. "I was a master sergeant. Reconnaissance unit. 12 men under Lieutenant Chen's command. We were behind enemy lines gathering intelligence when Chinese forces ambushed us. Heavy casualties. Chen gave the order to fall back, to retreat to the rally point." Bob's fingers found the Purple Heart, gripping it like a lifeline. "Private Morrison was hit. Couldn't move. Chen ordered us to leave him. Mission was critical. Lives were at stake. It was the right call, tactically. But I couldn't do it." "You went back," Sarah whispered. "I refused a direct order. Went back under fire, dragged Morrison 200 yards toward our position. He died in my arms anyway, and I took a bullet to my back doing it." The room was silent except for the monitors beeping steadily. "Field medic said the bullet was lodged too close to my spine, too risky to remove in the field. They stabilized me, shipped me to a MASH unit, then home." Bob's voice cracked. 2 days after I was evacuated, Lieutenant Chen was killed in a different engagement, because I wasn't there, because I'd disobeyed orders." "Dad," Emily breathed. "They threatened court-martial for insubordination, but Chen couldn't testify. He was dead. The unit was scattered. Command let it go." Bob held up the letter. "Official inquiry, dropped. And they gave me this." He touched the bronze star. "For heroism, for trying to save Morrison." "But Morrison died anyway," Bob continued, tears streaming down his weathered face. "And Chen died because I wasn't at my post. I've carried that bullet and that guilt every day since." David pushed off from the wall, his military background making him struggle with what he was hearing. "You disobeyed a direct order?" "David," Emily warned. "No, I need to understand this. You put the mission at risk? Put other lives at risk?" Bob nodded slowly. "I did. And I've questioned that decision every day for 70 years. Your mother was the only one who knew. She helped me carry it. And after she died," his voice broke completely, "I've been alone with it." He unwrapped the silk bundle with shaking hands. This was Morrison's. his blood on this parachute silk. And this, he held up the bullet. I dug this out of Chen's body after they brought him back. Kept it as a reminder of what my choice cost him. Sarah touched her bandaged head, understanding flooding through her. You've been in pain all these years, physical and... Yes? Bob met her eyes, just like you. Carrying something that doesn't belong, something buried that keeps hurting. David's anger erupted. So you kept this secret? Let it eat you alive? Made Mom keep it too? It was my burden. And now look at you. That bullet's infected. You could die. For what? For pride? David's voice rose. This family and its secrets. I'm done. He started toward the door. I understand. Sarah's quiet voice stopped him. All eyes turned to her. I have something inside me, too. 7 larvae removed yesterday. Maybe 8. The doctors aren't sure. The room froze. I keep feeling it, Sarah continued, her voice small. Every night. This flutter, this pulse. I don't know if it's real or if I'm imagining it, but it's there. Inside me. And I can't get it out completely. Just like you and that bullet, Dad. Bob's eyes met Sarah's across the room. In that moment, father and daughter recognized each other completely, both carrying foreign objects, both uncertain if the extraction was complete, both terrified of what remained hidden. I'm scared they missed one, Sarah said. That it's still growing inside me. I'm scared I did the wrong thing, Bob whispered. That it's still killing me. Emily's voice cut through the tension. You're both doing the same thing, carrying it alone, in silence, letting it destroy you from the inside. She was crying now. Mom died and didn't tell us about her symptoms until stage 4. Is that what we do in this family? Suffer quietly until it's too late? David turned back from the door, his anger deflating into something raw. He walked to the bed and picked up the photograph of the 4 soldiers. Morrison's family. Did they know? That you tried? Bob reached into the box with trembling hands and pulled out another envelope, this one addressed in faded feminine script. From his mother, 1954. I wrote to tell them he didn't die alone. David opened it carefully, read the handwritten words thanking Bob for staying with her son, for giving them that comfort. By the time he finished, tears were streaming down his face. You've been punishing yourself for nothing, David said softly. She thanked you. His family thanked you for trying. At 8:30, orderlies arrived to take Bob to the operating room. The family gathered around his bed. The anger burned away, leaving only love and fear. Bob spoke to each child in turn. David, you were right to be angry. I'm sorry I wasn't open with you, with any of you. Dad, Emily, you take care of everyone, but you need to let others take care of you too. You're so much like your mother that way. Emily nodded, unable to speak. Sarah. Bob gripped her hand. Don't hide like I did. Whatever's in there, get it out, all of it, promise me. I promise. Bob's voice grew quieter. If I don't make it, don't, Emily choked out. If I don't, I want my flag at half-mast, one day. For Morrison and Chen, he paused. And for your mother. She served too, in her way. We'll do it, Dad, David said. But you're coming back. For the first time in his children's memory, Bob Mitchell admitted vulnerability. I'm scared. Sarah squeezed his hand. Me too, but we're getting these things out together. At 8:45, they wheeled Bob down the corridor toward the surgical wing. His children watched until he disappeared through the double doors, Emily's arm around Sarah, David standing close but separate, all of them waiting. In side-by-side operating rooms, 2 procedures began. Dr. Hoffman performed an exploratory exam on Sarah under sedation, checking that 8th shadow one final time. She extended the healing incision slightly, probed every pocket and cavity, searching, and found nothing. Empty space. Scar tissue forming. No larva, no eggs, just healing. In the adjacent OR, Dr. Chen's team worked to access the bullet fragment embedded near Bob's spine. Precise dissection between ribs, careful navigation around nerves. The fragment appeared, 4.2 centimeters of corroded brass that had lived in Bob Mitchell's body for 70 years. Extraction proved difficult. The fragment had encapsulated in scar tissue that had to be carefully separated. Then complications. The surgical blade nicked an intercostal artery. Blood pressure dropped. Alarms sounded. Pressure! Clamp! The team worked with urgent precision. The bleeding was controlled, but it had been close. Too close. Finally, the fragment came free and was placed in a sterile dish. The abscess was drained, infected tissue removed with meticulous care. The wound closed in layers. In the waiting room at 10:15, Emily paced while Sarah sat in her wheelchair and David stared at cold coffee. Dr. Hoffman emerged first, still in her surgical cap. "Sarah, good news. We found nothing. You're clear." Sarah dissolved into tears of relief. Emily held her while she cried. Time stretched. 10:20, 10:30, every minute feeling like an hour. At 10:35, Dr. Chen emerged through the surgical doors, her face professionally neutral. The children's hearts stopped as one, waiting for words that would either break them or save them. Dr. Sarah Chen's face revealed nothing as she approached the waiting room. Emily, Sarah, and David rose simultaneously, their bodies tense with dread. "The surgery had complications," Dr. Chen said without preamble. Emily's nursing training kicked in, steadying her even as her heart raced. "What kind of complications?" Dr. Chen gestured for them to sit, but no one moved. The fragment was successfully removed. She held up a small specimen container. Inside, a piece of corroded brass, 4.2 centimeters long, sat in sterile solution. The thing that had lived in their father's body since 1952. But during extraction, we nicked an intercostal artery. There was significant blood loss, approximately 900 milliliters. We controlled the bleeding, but his blood pressure dropped dangerously low. Sarah gripped the arms of her wheelchair. Additionally, Dr. Chen continued, the abscess was larger than the imaging suggested. It extended deeper toward the pleural cavity. We had to remove more infected tissue than anticipated. During the procedure, his lung partially collapsed. We re-inflated it and placed a chest tube. "Where is he now?" David's voice was barely audible. "ICU. Stable, but critical. He's sedated and on a ventilator to assist his breathing. The next 48 to 72 hours will determine his recovery." Dr. Chen's eyes held genuine concern. "He's strong, but he's 73, and his body's been compensating for that fragment for 7 decades. This is a significant shock to his system." "Is he going to die?" Sarah asked, the words escaping before she could stop them. Dr. Chen met her eyes with the honesty that separated good doctors from great ones. "I don't know. We've done everything we can. Now it's up to him." David sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Emily stood frozen, her medical knowledge telling her exactly how bad stable but critical could be. Sarah sat in her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "This is my fault. This is my fault." Bob's ICU room was a forest of machines. The ventilator whooshed rhythmically, forcing air into lungs that couldn't manage on their own. Monitors beeped in steady intervals. IV lines ran clear fluids and medications into both arms. A chest tube drained bloody fluid into a collection chamber. Bob lay unconscious, sedated, his weathered face slack against white pillows. Emily approached the bedside with practiced assessment. Oxygen saturation, 91% too low. Blood pressure, 110/65, stable but concerning. Heart rate, 88, elevated. She'd seen enough critical patients to know her father was balanced on a knife's edge. Sarah rolled her wheelchair close to the bed, took her father's hand, and whispered, "This is my fault. If I hadn't come to dinner Sunday, if my bump hadn't started this whole thing—" "Sarah, stop." Emily's voice was sharp. "Dad's infection was already there, already getting worse. You both needed this. The bullet had to come out." But Sarah spiraled deeper into guilt, unable to hear reason. At 10 that evening, David stepped into the hallway. Emily found him minutes later, his back against the wall, shoulders shaking with sobs. "I walked out," David choked, during his story. "I got angry and I walked out." Emily put her arms around her brother. "He knows you love him. Does he?" David's face was anguished. "I haven't said it in years. What if those are the last words he heard from me? My anger?" The family settled into shifts through the night. Sarah dozed fitfully in her wheelchair, medication and exhaustion finally claiming her. Emily and David traded places at Bob's bedside, one keeping vigil while the other tried unsuccessfully to sleep in the waiting room. Emily read to her sedated father from the letters in the metal box. Morrison's mother's note of gratitude, old anniversary cards from Margaret that she'd found tucked inside. "We're here, Dad. We're all here," she whispered. Thursday brought no change. Morning rounds produced neutral reports. Bob remained sedated, the ventilator still necessary. The chest tube output was decreasing, which was good, but infection markers in his blood work remained elevated, which wasn't. Dr. Chen visited during afternoon rounds. "He's holding steady. That's good." Emily understood what wasn't being said. Steady wasn't improving. "Should we be worried?" "I'm cautiously optimistic, but yes, be prepared." Sarah was discharged that afternoon, her wound healing well according to Dr. Hoffman, but she refused to leave. "I'm staying with Dad." "You need rest. Real rest," Emily insisted. "I can rest here." Sarah's jaw set with Mitchell's stubbornness. They compromised. Sarah went home to shower and change, then returned to the hospital, taking up residence in a waiting room chair. The community responded in ways the family hadn't expected. Powell's Books sent flowers and a card signed by every staff member. The local VFW Post, Bob's membership had been news to his children, sent their commander to the ICU waiting room. "We take care of our own," the commander said simply, offering whatever support the family needed. An elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, arrived with homemade soup. "Your father helped my husband in Korea. They served together. I never forgot." Another secret Bob had kept. Another connection he'd never mentioned. At 11:30 Thursday night, Emily was in the cafeteria with David and Sarah when the overhead speaker crackled. "Code Blue, ICU room 7. Emily's blood turned to ice. "That's Dad's room." She ran. The ICU was organized chaos when Emily burst through the doors. Medical staff surrounded Bob's bed. The ventilator alarm shrieked. His oxygen saturation plummeted on the monitor. 85, 80, 75. "Tension pneumothorax," someone called out. "Air's leaking into the chest cavity." Emily watched through the window as her father's chest moved wrong, as pressure built where it shouldn't, compressing his heart and lungs, life-threatening, fatal if not immediately corrected. Dr. Rashid, the ICU attending, was already at the bedside. "Need to decompress now." A large bore needle appeared. Dr. Rashid positioned it between ribs and pushed. Air rushed out under pressure with a sound Emily would never forget. On the monitor, Bob's oxygen saturation began climbing. 78, 82, 87. The crisis stabilized, but barely. A second chest tube was placed emergently, right there in the ICU, with no time for the operating room. Emily watched through the glass, her hands pressed against the window as they inserted the tube into her father's chest. Sarah arrived, out of breath, David behind her. They're fixing it," Emily said, her voice hollow. "Watch." At 12:45, Dr. Rashid emerged. "Pneumothorax from the surgical site. Not uncommon with this type of procedure, but serious. We've decompressed. He's stable again." "But—" Emily heard what wasn't being said. "But this is a setback. He'll need the ventilator longer. Recovery will be extended." Friday morning brought the family's lowest point. Sarah sat in a chair by Bob's bed, staring at nothing. "I can't feel anything anymore, behind my ear." "Is that normal?" Emily looked up from checking their father's monitors. "You're healed. That's good. But what if I've lost feeling forever? What if Dad never wakes up?" Sarah's catastrophizing was a trauma response Emily recognized but couldn't fix. Later, David pulled Emily aside in the hallway. "I divorced Rachel because I couldn't talk to her. Just like Dad couldn't talk to us. I'm terrified I'm just like him. Silent. Suffering. Pushing everyone away." "Then don't be," Emily said. "Talk. Starting now. Starting here." The family sat in the waiting room that afternoon, 3 days into Bob's post-operative crisis. The machines kept him alive. The question forming in everyone's mind was how long they should wait. Dr. Chen visited with gentle honesty. "Let's give him through the weekend, see where we are Monday." No one said what Monday might mean, what decisions might need to be made. Friday evening, Emily found herself in the hospital chapel for the first time in years. She knelt in the dim quiet, hands clasped. "I don't know if you're there," she whispered, "but if you are, he's a good man. He made a mistake 70 years ago and never forgave himself. Don't let that be his ending. Please." She sat in silence, surrounded by the weight of almost loss, and waited for an answer that didn't come. Saturday morning found Sarah alone in her childhood home for the first time since her mother's death. Emily had asked her to pick up fresh clothes. 4 days in the hospital had left Emily rumpled and exhausted. Sarah moved through the quiet rooms like a ghost. Everything familiar, yet strange without Bob's presence filling the spaces. She found herself drawn to the woodshop in the garage. The chair Bob had been building for her apartment sat half-finished on the workbench, tools arranged with his characteristic precision. Everything was exactly as he'd left it Sunday night before the world tilted sideways, except for a small envelope on the workbench corner, addressed in Bob's careful handwriting. "My children." Sarah's hands trembled as she picked it up. The date in the corner read September 29th, the night after their disastrous Sunday dinner. Before any of this had started, before the surgeries, before the crises, before the revelations, she shouldn't open it. She should wait for Emily and David. She opened it. Bob's handwriting covered both sides of lined paper torn from a woodshop notebook. The words were shaky in places, stronger in others, as though he'd written it in stages between waves of pain or courage. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone, or close to it. I should have told you everything years ago. Your mother wanted me to. She said secrets were like infections. They spread if you don't treat them. She was right. She was always right. The bullet in my back isn't the only thing I've carried. The guilt of Morrison's death, the question of whether I did right, the fear that my disobedience cost Chen his life. These things weighed more than any metal. But your mother told me something before she died. She said, "Bob, you gave Morrison dignity. You gave his family closure. You chose compassion over orders. That's who you are. That's the man I married." I never believed her. Until now. Facing surgery, facing death, I finally understand what she meant. I'm not asking forgiveness for staying silent. I'm asking you to learn from my mistake. Don't bury your pain. Don't carry it alone. Sarah, whatever you're afraid of about that bump, face it. Get it checked. Don't hide like I did. Emily, you carry everyone's burdens. Let someone carry yours sometimes. You deserve that care you give so freely to others. David, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But don't let anger become silence like I did. Talk to Rachel. Talk to someone. Don't end up alone in a wood shop at 73 wishing you'd said the words when they mattered. I love you. I should have said it more. I'm saying it now. The flag goes to half-mast for Morrison and Chen, but also for your mother. She served too, in her way. She held this family together when I couldn't. Dad. Sarah's tears fell onto the paper, smudging ink that was already blotched with what might have been Bob's own tears. She called Emily immediately. "You need to hear this," Sarah said, her voice breaking. An hour later, the three siblings gathered in the hospital chapel, neutral ground, quiet, away from the beeping machines and antiseptic smell of their father's room. Sarah read the letter aloud, her voice steady until the end, when it cracked on, "I love you." David's composure shattered. He wrote this before surgery. He was saying goodbye. "He thought he wouldn't make it," Emily whispered. "He knew he might die. And he finally said everything he'd never been able to say." Sarah folded the letter carefully. "Mom knew everything. She helped him carry it. And now she's gone. And he's been carrying it alone." David's voice held a terrible understanding. "Just like I've been alone since Rachel left. Just like we've all been alone." "Because we learned it from them," Emily said. "The silence, the suffering, it's what this family does." Sarah looked at her siblings. "What if we stopped? What if we broke the pattern?" "Starting now," David said. "Right now. No more secrets." And so they talked, really talked, perhaps for the first time in years. Sarah confessed how she'd minimized her symptoms for weeks, ignoring the bump, afraid to worry anyone. David admitted the truth about his divorce, that he'd shut Rachel out, unable to communicate, repeating his father's patterns of emotional withdrawal. Emily finally acknowledged her exhaustion, how she'd been holding the family together since Margaret's death at the cost of her own well-being. The honesty was painful and necessary and long overdue. Emily's colleague found them in the chapel at 2:00. "Emily, your dad's vitals are changing." 3 hearts stopped. "Bad?" Emily managed. The nurse smiled. "Good. Really good. You should come." Bob's monitors told a story Emily's trained eyes could read instantly. Oxygen saturation, 96%, up from 91. Heart rate, 72, normalized. Blood pressure, 128/76, strong and steady. The chest tubes showed minimal drainage. Most remarkably, he was triggering the ventilator himself, trying to breathe on his own. Dr. Rashid reviewed the changes with barely concealed surprise. Something shifted around 3 this afternoon. Vitals started improving across the board. Infection markers are dropping. Lung expansion is increasing. He paused. I can't explain it medically. Sometimes patients just decide to fight. He heard us, David said. Somehow, he heard us. Emily wanted to dismiss this as wishful thinking, but she'd been a nurse long enough to witness the inexplicable. Maybe. That evening, the VFW commander returned with official service records he'd requested through military channels. The documents revealed something Bob had never told them. The Bronze Star wasn't only for attempting to rescue Morrison. After Morrison's death and Bob's wounding, after Lieutenant Chen was killed 2 days later, Bob Mitchell had held a defensive position with a bullet in his back, leading the remaining 6 men of his unit to safety under heavy fire. Wounded, grieving, barely able to move, he'd saved 6 lives. He was a hero, twice over, the commander said quietly. Not just for Morrison, for all of them. The children stared at the citations, learning who their father truly was. A man who'd saved lives. A man who'd punished himself for the one he couldn't save, while never acknowledging the 6 he did. Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, Dr. Rashid made his announcement. We're going to try extubation. If he can breathe on his own, we'll remove the tube. The family gathered around Bob's bed. Emily held Sarah's hand. David stood at the foot of the bed, gripping the rail. The sedation was reduced gradually. Bob began to wake, his eyes moving beneath closed lids. He coughed, a good sign, the respiratory therapist assured them, and coughed again. The breathing tube was removed carefully. An oxygen mask replaced it, and Bob Mitchell breathed on his own. His eyes opened slowly, confused and disoriented. He saw 3 faces hovering over him, saw his children, and tears immediately filled his eyes. He tried to speak. His voice came out as a rasp from the tube trauma. "Don't talk yet, Dad," Emily said gently. "Just breathe." Bob's hand reached out weakly. Sarah took it, and he gripped her fingers with surprising strength. He mouthed words. "I'm sorry." "No, Dad." David leaned closer. "We're sorry. We read your letter." Bob's confusion was visible even through the oxygen mask. "From your woodshop," Sarah explained. "You wrote it before surgery." Understanding flooded Bob's face. He nodded slightly, remembering. Dr. Rashid checked Bob's vitals, asked questions to assess neurological function. "Mr. Mitchell, can you tell me your pain level?" 1 to 10? Bob's answer, when it came in a hoarse whisper, shocked everyone. 3. They stared at him. "Your back?" Emily asked. "Only a 3? Doesn't hurt?" Bob's voice was barely audible, rough from intubation. "First time in... can't remember." 70 years of chronic pain, simply gone. The fragment removed. The constant ache that had been Bob Mitchell's companion since Eisenhower's presidency had vanished. "You shouldn't have read the letter," Bob whispered. "We needed to," Emily said. "I meant it. All of it." David's voice broke. "We know, Dad. We love you too." It was the first time David had said those words in years. Bob's tears flowed freely then, and his children gathered close around the hospital bed, holding each other and him, the walls between them finally, blessedly gone. Outside, morning light filled the October sky. In ICU Room 7, a family began to heal. Sunday evening brought the first real conversations. Bob was weak but lucid, breathing on his own with just supplemental oxygen. The chest tubes would be removed Monday if drainage stayed minimal. The children rotated visits, one at a time, mindful of his fragile state. Sarah went first, rolling her wheelchair close to his bedside. "How's your ear?" Bob asked, his voice still hoarse. Sarah pulled her hair back to show the healing scar. "All gone, Dad. 7 of them." "7?" His eyes widened. "They think they got them all." Sarah's hand unconsciously touched the scar. "But I'm not completely sure." Bob understood immediately. "You're afraid they missed one?" "Yes. But I'm choosing to believe, to hope." "Good." Bob's hand found hers. "That's good. Your back doesn't hurt anymore?" "No pain. After 70 years, I'd forgotten what this feels like." They sat in comfortable silence, something they'd always shared. Finally, Sarah spoke. "We both had something inside us, buried deep." "Not anymore," Bob whispered. "Not anymore." David came next, awkward at first after years of distance. He pulled a chair close and showed Bob the service records the VFW had brought. "You saved 6 men after Chen died. Led them out under fire with a bullet in your back." Bob's voice was tired. "I did what anyone would—" "No, you didn't. You were a hero multiple times." David's voice thickened. "Morrison still haunts you, but 6 others lived because of you." Bob had never considered it that way. 70 years of focusing on the one he couldn't save, blind to the 6 he had. "I'm sorry I walked out during your story," David said. "I'm sorry I never told you any of it." "Let's start now," David said. "Really start. No more silence." Bob nodded, exhausted, but something lighter in his eyes. "I'd like that, son." Emily came last, automatically checking his vitals out of habit. Bob smiled weakly. "You don't always have to take care of everyone." "That's rich coming from you," Emily said, but her tone was gentle. "I learned the hard way." Bob's eyes closed briefly. "Your mother used to tell you that. You carry too much, Em." She was right. She usually was. "I miss her," Emily whispered. "Me too. Every single day." "Did the letter help? Writing it?" "Yes. Felt like confession. Unburdening." Bob squeezed her hand. "Thank you for bringing the box." "We're all unburdening now, Dad. No more secrets. Deal?" "Deal." Monday brought transfer from ICU to a regular medical floor. Physical therapy began, short walks with a walker, breathing exercises, gentle movement. Bob's back mobility was better than it had been in decades. The fragment had been pressing on nerves, limiting his range of motion. Now freed, his body began remembering what ease of movement felt like. Tuesday, the chest tubes came out, both of them. X-rays showed his lungs fully expanded and clear. Dr. Chen visited with genuine pleasure in her eyes. "You can go home end of the week if this progress continues." Wednesday, Sarah brought books from Powell's and read to her father the way he'd once read to her as a child. She chose Margaret's favorite, To Kill a Mockingbird, and they shared the quiet communion of 2 readers in love with the same words. Thursday brought a surprise. David arrived with Rachel, his ex-wife. "I called her," David explained. "We talked. Really talked for the first time in 2 years. She agreed to meet for coffee tomorrow." I told her about you, about all of this, David continued. She said breaking the silence is the first step to healing. Bob's eyes filled with tears. I'm proud of you, son. David's composure cracked. You've never said that before. I should have. So many times, I'm saying it now. Friday morning, Sarah arrived with fresh clothes for Bob's discharge. She held up his standard blue chambray shirt, then hesitated. Dad, maybe a different shirt? Why? You always wore these to hide the scar on your back. Sarah met his eyes. You don't have to hide anymore. Bob stared at the blue shirt, seeing it suddenly for what it was, a uniform of concealment worn for 70 years. How about a white one? It was the first color change since 1952. Small, but everything was about to be different now. The first week's home required adjustment. Emily moved in temporarily to help with recovery. Sarah visited daily after work. David drove down from Seattle every weekend, sometimes with Rachel, who was slowly, carefully letting him back into her life. Home health nurses came 3 times weekly. Physical therapy continued twice a week at an outpatient clinic. Bob grew stronger daily, his body responding to freedom from chronic pain with vigor that surprised everyone. On October 18th, Bob returned to his woodshop for the first time since surgery. His children worried. Dad, maybe rest. But he was determined. I need to finish something, he said simply. Sarah's chair, the one he'd been building, waited on the workbench. Bob sat down, tools in his hands, feeling right and familiar. He worked an hour each day, slowly, carefully. The chair took shape, beautiful in its simplicity. Sunday dinners resumed, but everything was different now. The family talked, stories flowed. Laughter came more easily. Bob sat at the head of the table, smiling in ways his children had never seen. On October 20th, David brought Rachel to dinner. She and Bob met formally for the first time in years. He talks about you, Rachel told Bob. Really? Bob seemed genuinely surprised. Never stopped, David said quietly. The flag ceremony happened on October 22nd. The VFW commander came to the house in full uniform. Bob sat in a wheelchair on the porch, still too weak for prolonged standing. Neighbors gathered on the lawn, witnesses to something sacred. The commander lowered the flag to half-mast as he read names. Private James Morrison, Lieutenant Thomas Chen, Margaret Ann Mitchell. Taps played from a recording, the mournful notes carrying across the neighborhood. Bob, in his new white shirt, raised his hand in salute. Tears streamed down his weathered face. But these were different tears. Healing tears. Closure after 70 years. Sarah's 2-week follow-up CT scan on October 24th showed no masses, no pockets, nothing concerning. You're officially clear, Dr. Hoffman said. So it's really gone? It's really gone. Sarah touched her scar, and for the first time felt no fear, just relief flooding through her like light. November 7th, a large package arrived at Powell's Books addressed to Sarah. Inside was the finished chair, gorgeous woodwork with an inscription carved into the back. For Sarah, no more silence. Love, Dad, Sarah cried in the middle of her bookstore, and when her coworker asked if she was okay, she smiled through tears. Better than okay. Thanksgiving preparation became a family affair. All 3 children gathered at Bob's house days before the holiday. They cooked together using Margaret's recipes. Sarah making cornbread, Emily supervising the pot roast, David attempting pumpkin pie and burning the crust to general laughter. The radio played big band music, Bob presided from a kitchen chair, offering advice that was really just an excuse to be part of the warmth and chaos and joy. Thanksgiving Day, the table was set for 4 with one empty chair. Margaret's photograph in her WW2 nurse's uniform sat beside it, her presence honored and felt. David made his announcement during dinner. "Rachel and I are trying again. We're going to counseling. Really talking this time." They raised glasses to second chances. Emily shared her news. "I'm taking a vacation. First time in 3 years. Going to actually rest." Sarah's turn. "I'm taking a writing class. I'm going to write our story. This family's story." Bob smiled. "I'd like to read that." Then Bob suggested something he'd never done before. "Let's each say what we're grateful for." Emily went first. "I'm grateful we almost lost you, Dad, because it woke us all up." David nodded. "I'm grateful for second chances, in every form." Sarah touched her scar. "I'm grateful for what came out. The larvae, the bullet, the secrets, all of it." Bob took a moment, gathering words that had lived silently in his heart for decades. "I'm grateful I survived. Not just the bullet, not just the surgery, but 70 years of carrying guilt I didn't need to carry. I'm grateful for your mother, for teaching me love even when I couldn't show it. And I'm grateful for you 3, for not giving up on a stubborn old man." After dinner, they sat on the porch watching the November sunset paint Portland's sky in orange and purple. Bob in his rocking chair, Sarah in her new chair beside him. The American flag flew at full mast again, snapping gently in the autumn breeze. The silence between them was comfortable now, not the silence of secrets, but the silence of understanding. "You know what's strange?" Bob said. "What?" "I can't even feel the scar, like it was never there." Sarah touched her own. "Me too." They smiled at each other, knowing it had been there, knowing it had shaped them, but understanding it no longer defined them. December brought holiday music to the woodshop. Bob worked on a new project, a coffee table for David and Rachel's apartment. They were moving back in together, taking it slow, talking through everything this time. Sarah visited after work one evening and found her father sanding wood, humming along to "I'll Be Home for Christmas." He moved without pain, his body free after 7 decades of burden. "Dad, you seem happy." Bob looked up, and his smile was genuine and whole. "I am, for the first time in longer than I can remember." Sarah crossed the workshop and hugged him. He hugged back, fully, openly, with no walls between them. Sometimes healing requires extraction. Sometimes what's buried inside us, pain, secrets, fragments of the past, must be removed before we can truly live. Sarah and Bob both learned this through terror and surgery, through near death and rebirth. They learned together, and their family learned with them. That November in Portland, the Mitchells discovered that the most dangerous things we carry aren't always visible, and the bravest thing we can do is let them go. Together. Bob Mitchell carried a bullet for 70 years because he thought silence was strength. Sarah almost lost her father because both of them had learned to suffer alone. How many of us carry our own fragments? Guilt from choices made decades ago, words left unsaid to people who mattered, pain we've normalized because that's just how it is? This story isn't just about medical miracles. It's about that moment when you finally realize the weight you've been carrying doesn't have to define the rest of your life. Bob got 70 years of chronic pain erased in one surgery, but the real healing happened when he finally told his children the truth he'd buried since Korea. The Mitchells learned something powerful. It's never too late to break the silence, to say, "I love you," to choose connection over pride. They almost lost everything before they found each other again. But they did find each other. And if they can transform decades of distance into Thanksgiving dinner filled with laughter and second chances, what's possible for the rest of us? What have you been carrying that's too heavy? What conversation have you been avoiding that might change everything? Share your story in the comments. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.